How did the concept of God sneak into our brains? And when did it get zapped into the brains of Homo sapiens? Let us explore it in this video. Hello and welcome to another episode of Evolution of Gods and Religions. Over the last few episodes, we have seen how the various stories about the ancient gods have been copy-pasted within various religions and civilizations. Today, we will see how the concept got engraved in the human brains. And we will use evidence from human evolution. Also, a gentle reminder to check out our new channel, The Rational Scientist, and subscribe to see the videos earlier than in Pale Blue Thoughts. Hello, I am Anand and I welcome you to the channel which promotes scientific temper and demotes pseudoscience and religions. So imagine a period where the early ancestors of Homo sapiens were roaming around hunting and being hunted. So how did he find out about God? Or more importantly, how did the God find him in this gigantic universe and start talking to him? Let us go back in time, shall we? So how did the early humans get to the concept of God? For that, we have to know the life experiences of people in those times. In ancient times, people started living together in caves and hunted in groups. The main reason for this cooperation was because humans as a species are a very frail species. I have mentioned this before, I believe. We cannot outrun a tiger or fight a lion. Our most insecure period of our life, that is when we are infants, lasts very long time, and that gives our predators more opportunities to kill us off. So we understood that we can survive better if we cooperate, and we found out the strength in this cooperation. And then humans invented agriculture. Agriculture caused humans to start live in small groups and have livestock, and for the first time have wealth or assets. The next big invention of humans was language and writing. Now, this invention is supposed to have happened in ancient Mesopotamia, and the first form of writing may have been to count. Because with the advent of agriculture, humans started to have domestic animals, cultivated land, crops, etc. So he had to invent counting. If you look at the earliest forms of writing, you can see that the alphabets were in fact pictures of various things. But as writing complexity increased, it was difficult to draw pictures every time. So they simplified it to symbols which meant various things. The earliest form of written language that has been discovered is generally considered to be Sumerian cuneiform, which existed around 3500 BCE. Other ancient writing systems such as the Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Indus Valley script also emerged around a similar time. Now as time progressed, humans started to write more and created stories and poems on clay tablets. One of the earliest examples that we have received is something which I have mentioned in one of my earlier videos in the series, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is both a poem and a story. The epic follows the exploits of Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, and his quest for immortality. What is more interesting is that the epic delves a lot into the philosophical aspects of life and death. Now, if you consider the size of the brain, you won't find much difference between those humans and the present ones, because 4000 years is a very brief time period when you consider the length of human evolution. But knowledge or information is something that separates them from us. Today, we have a lot of accumulated information that we have gathered in those years. But in those days, since people had very less knowledge about things around them, it would reflect only the understanding of that society and some imagination. For example, in a book written, let's say, 1000 years ago, you would not have people going and robbing a bank or using the internet, because banks and internet didn't exist then. So all stories reflect the information that people had in those times, and they cleverly weaved in a lot of creativity, just like what J.K. Rowling did with Harry Potter. But in those days, you can write about beings flying even though there were no aeroplanes. That is because they could see birds fly and can write about flying monkeys and riding on flying donkeys. One of the first written stories about a god and a creation is Enuma Elish, written by early Babylonians. So the ultimate question still remains: how did these ancient people get this concept in the first place? Let us delve deeper in time to understand that. If you go back in time, we will see that there were a lot of hominids in our evolution tree. Homo neanderthals, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and before that, the Australopithecines. So who was the first to bring in the God concept? We know that we could speak before we could write. We can see that even today, right? Infants speak before they can read and write. So let us see who among our ancestors spoke first, because it is to those people that gods would have first spoken to and told him, "Hello buddy, I am your creator." Now, what are the prerequisites for talking? A mouth, a tongue, and a voice box? No. First and foremost, you need a strong brain. A brain which can process sounds and differentiate it, understand language, grammar, and other things connected to speech. The Broca area and Wernicke area are two important regions of the brain associated with language processing. They are part of a larger neural network responsible for understanding and producing language. The Broca area, located in the left frontal lobe of the brain, is primarily involved in the production of speech and language. The Wernicke area, situated in the left temporal lobe of the brain, is associated with the understanding of language. It plays a key role to allow individuals to understand spoken and written language. How do we know this? Because we know that damage to these areas of the brain affects our ability to speak and understand language. Next, we need genes which allows us to produce speech and to develop language. The most important gene in this regard is called the FOXP2 gene. FOXP2 is known as the language gene because of its association with language abilities, particularly speech and vocalization. But getting evidences for these are next to impossible from fossils. So we need other methods to find out how speech developed. One important clue comes from the supra-laryngeal vocal tract. The supra-laryngeal vocal tract refers to the portion of the vocal tract above the larynx, which includes the oral cavity, the pharynx, and the nasal cavity. This vocal tract as a whole plays a crucial role in speech production. It has the ability to shape and modify the sounds produced by the larynx or the voice box, allowing us to speak. In fact, the length and shape of the vocal tract influence the production of vowels and consonants. You know, the vowel sounds are the heart of every language, right? We need them to be able to produce complex words and sentences by attaching it to the consonants. Now, let us compare the supra-laryngeal nerves to the chimpanzee and humans. Humans have a lower voice box, making our mouth longer and allowing our tongue to move more. This helps us make a wider variety of sounds. Human tongues are flatter and wider, giving us better control over different speech sounds. Humans also have a longer throat than chimpanzees. This helps us create more kinds of vowel sounds. Chimpanzees can make various sounds too, but their throat is not as suited for the variety and precision found in human speech. Some researchers suggest that the anatomical structures necessary for speech might have developed in the Homo erectus. The expansion of the brain, changes in the vocal tract, and increased social complexity during the Homo erectus era are considered potential signs of speech. Homo heidelbergensis also is considered a potential candidate for the development of language. But they would not have been able to use complex language and sounds due to their smaller brain size and voice box. And a complex language with some form of grammar is essential to convey important ideas or imagination and to express it properly. You can't do that using just sounds and gestures. For example, if I have to convey to someone about not entering a cave, I saw a lion in there last week. I saw it again yesterday, so it's likely to be living there. Telling this requires a lot of words and, more importantly, grammar. So from available fossil records, we can safely assume that gods first spoke to early Homo sapiens around 200,000 years ago. So the early humans started to use language to propagate ideas and imaginative thoughts. So what kind of imaginative thoughts would have early humans communicated? For that, we have to understand the living circumstances of the cave-dwelling human beings. He would have had no clue about what is that round thing that appears in the sky every day and disappears, and then darkness falls and another round object takes its place. What are those flashes in the sky followed by loud sounds? Why does water fall from the sky? Why does grass and trees rustle? All these would have been terrifying experiences for him. This would have prompted them to imagine an unseen force which creates all of this, something which they could not control. So in order to keep this terrifying force in check, the early humans would have pleaded to the force above them. Why above? Because most of these things happened from above, and people who were able to give some explanation to these would have become the priests of those times. And because most people did not know what to make of these things, they were forced to believe whatever explanations these priests gave. And slowly, these forces became the earliest gods who resided above us and controlled everything from there. Now in the society, there would have been enemies as well as friends. Now, how would you stop somebody from killing you? You offer them something in return. How do you please a friend? By buying a gift. And in those times, they had nothing but their livestock and grains and things made out of these grains. So they started to offer the same to the gods in order to please them and to ensure they're not angry with them and send down thunderbolts or floods. And the priests would have supported this because the gods are not going to come and take these offerings. It would be taken by the priests themselves. So this bribing culture would have developed around those times. And unfortunately, it still continues to this day. Even today, we make several offerings in way of food or animal sacrifice to appease our gods. And it was important for the priests of those times to keep the people living in fear of all these things so that they can have a hold on them and make them do whatever they wanted. They utilized our natural tendencies of fear and greed to keep people chained to superstitions. At first, they would have offered the gods grains. Sometimes they got what they prayed for, but sometimes what they prayed for did not happen. So they increased their offering and offered them livestock, which was more precious to them. If that didn't work, they finally turned to offering other humans as sacrifice. Early Egyptians used to kill the servants of the early kings and bury them alongside their kings. I mean, after all, the king would need servants in his next life, right? Now, where did this concept of afterlife come from? If you take a look at any culture, any for that matter, ghosts are always the souls of people who have died. This has a deep-rooted connection with our dreams. Suppose one of your near and dear ones died. Later, they came in your dreams. And what would they have done in them? They wouldn't have had dreams about them going to school or work meetings, right? The characters in those dreams would have probably asked for food because that was what humans did in those days. Hunt and get food. Now, the early humans wouldn't have had any idea that these were just dreams. They would have thought that these are things happening in real, in another world perhaps. This is what gave rise to the concept of an afterlife. If you look at the early human graves, you can still find food and other materials buried along with the dead, which clearly points to this. Sadly, even today, many people follow this caveman concept and offer food for the dead. Now let us fast forward to the humans as a farmer. When he started to live in small groups and raise livestock, he noted something. He noted that some traits got passed on from parents to offsprings, especially some diseases. So this notion that some things got passed on from an earlier generation to the next one gave rise to the concept of sharp or curses. That sins or curses would also get passed on from generation to generation took wings then. This is also the time when ghosts or evil forces became prominent in their imagination. How? It was when they started to live in groups that diseases, especially infectious diseases, became a regular feature. So the humans would have thought that good things are given by good gods, so bad things are given by bad gods, giving rise to the concept of the devil and other evil forces. I'm sure now you would have understood how the concept of God became ingrained in the psyche of humans through the history of human evolution, or rather, how man created God. In fact, God is an interesting concept. It shows the power of the brains of the early cave-dwelling man who sought to look for answers to the things that happened around him. And from the knowledge that he had and the situations that he encountered, he weaved this highly imaginative concept called God. But this concept doesn't need to exist in the minds of the current Homo sapiens because the situations and knowledge have undergone drastic changes. But the problem is, our brain still remains the same pattern-seeking, agent-seeking brain that our early ancestors had. And so, there are many humans who still live in caves with the God concept. Do we need to really go back in time and embrace the concept of those cave dwellers? They did whatever they could with the limited knowledge that they had. But today, we live in a society in which science has provided better and more realistic and accurate explanations of things around us. Shouldn't we use that knowledge to enhance our lives and the lives to come in the future? Do we need to continue to embrace the outdated concepts developed by our imaginative ancestors? Think about it. It's time to move on. And it's time for me to move on as well. I hope you liked this episode about how the concept of God came into being. And as usual, I look forward to your likes and comments, which encourages me to make even more better content. Until we meet again, keep that scientific temper flowing.